It's July 11th, 2024, and I'm with segment 3 of Mr. John Jeckovich in his book entitled Their Mother's Sons, and we're on chapter 9, Crossing the Channel, and page 228, so here we go. Then she put her arms around my neck and whispered, "I would have gone with you." Jean brought the tea tray in the parlor, served each of us, and then sat down beside me. She knew her parents were tempted to be talkative and relaxed, but they were having not much success. After a short while, Jean said I had to return to the billets. I said goodnight to the Youngs and thanked them again for everything. We stepped out in the cold night air, and Jean hugged me to keep warm. I asked her if I could see her tomorrow, and she replied by my question, "Of course. What would you think? Why would you think differently?" She explained the plan for tomorrow. Sunday I would meet her here at 1300 hours, walk about the nearby park, visit the canteen in town, come back here for supper, then go back to the dance. "What do you think of that plan?" she exclaimed, pressing her head against my chest. "It sounds great," I replied. "I look forward to it." We kissed several times as I held her. I mentioned that it was getting late. She agreed but would not let me go as she continued to hold me ever so tightly. We stood there interlocked for several minutes. She reached up, kissed me, let go of me, and said that I'll see you tomorrow. With that, and she quickly walked into the front door, turned and waved, and entered the cottage. I reached the orderly room to sign in, and the CQ was asleep. I did not even know who it was, as his head was covered with a part of a blanket. It was cool in the room, as the fire in the fireplace was almost out. I hurriedly went into the billets to get my toilet articles, and soon back up the hill to the shower building. Having only washed up and brushed my teeth, I was back at the billets in my bunk about 1:45 hours. I thought about the day's events and wondered what Anne was doing at this moment. As I tried to transpose the difference in time, and I fell asleep. The first call for breakfast was at 5:45 hours. Even though I heard the CQ come in through the room blowing his whistle, I decided to sleep in and catch lunch at 12:30 hours. I lay here for a while, mulling over my present situation with Jean. After a bit, I was sorry that I had not gone to breakfast. They were having pancakes, bacon, hot cereal, and sweet rolls and coffee. You said you had a record of how many pancakes you ate at one time.
27.
27.
Yeah.
Were you sick after that?
Yeah, but they're small ones. They're not the big ones we had.
Oh, okay. I got up, went to the shower and shaved. On my way back, I met Larson. We talked a while and he wondered where I was keeping myself. I told him that I was around and he just probably missed one another coming and going. He said that was very likely, and he had been spending some considerable time at the regimental headquarters visiting his cousin. He also mentioned that he usually got a jeep ride to the Wolf's Castle, where regimental headquarters were billeted. He also said that in return to a trip was no problem, and there was a regular courier between the regiment and the various companies. Just then his ride arrived, and he stated that he'd see me at the dance tonight. Larson had a little of late in his makeup. Even though I liked him, I could tolerate him, but only for a short while.
That's late, huh?
Yeah.
Poor late, huh?
Yeah. While waiting to meet Jean, I wrote several letters, one to Mother and one to Sally, and another to Anne. As I wrote the letter to Mother and Sally, I was struck by all that happened to me in the period of the year. I was definitely not the same person who left home for the Army in late January of this year. I was more mature, more so than most of the people in my company who were my age. I acquired more self-esteem, most likely from knowing both Anne and Jean, and I was more aware of what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. Provided I was afforded the opportunity to live through the next year or so, as I thought about the events, it never occurred to me I was to reconcile or compromise my life path with my newfound enlightenment and understanding. My letters to home were usual, I miss everyone type thing, and I could not wait to get back for good. I did not say anything about leaving England or where we were going, and most of it would have been punched out by the censor. I only said I was enjoying myself in England and the weather was not bad and that I missed them. As I rode home, I found it difficult to actually relate to them. They did not seem for some reason close to me, if it was I writing to a distant friend or relative. That in itself was incomprehensible, considering how I anguished over them when I first entered the service. To Anne I wrote that I missed her very much and thought a great deal about our time together. I also mentioned the telegram and how much it meant to me. I had no difficulty expressing my sentiments and feelings toward her, even though I only knew that a third party was reading my thoughts and my intimate feelings. It was much easier writing to her than writing home. I could always find the right words to convey my thoughts, where in areas writing home, I was always frustrated in picking my words. Ultimately, I wrote nothing of substance, but mostly inconsequential gibberish. In writing to Anne, I kept it mostly cheerful and rather personal. We fell off for chow and marched to the mess hall, where I saw Sergeant Tracy, the mess sergeant. He asked me how I was doing and how were my English friends. I said I was doing fine, and they said thanks again for the rations. He waited to immediately make arrangements for another pet ration pickup, but I graciously declined his generous offer, saying that we would be leaving soon. He acknowledged the departure and stated that we're closing the mess hall after that we left, and we're all being transferred to Pacific. I was shocked at the news he revealed to me and elaborated further. The entire kitchen was shipped to the Pacific. He did not know the exact location. He would leave here next month after closing the mess hall in the kitchen and preparing it for storage. He would then stop off at the States for a 30-day furlough, then head to California and then to the Pacific. I again think that's Sergeant Tracy. He's going to be shipped to the Pacific.
Yeah.
I again thanked him for everything and wished him good luck on his new assignment. After reaching the billets, I changed from fatigues to ODs and prepared to leave to Jean's place. I stopped at the orderly room to sign off, and T-Fay Eckert was there with his usual derisive remarks. See is still operating, Jack. Must be nice, he sneered at me, and smiling. As usual, I gave him a smile and a wave and was out the door for the orderly room. I reached Jean's cottage. As I approached the front gate, she came running out and threw her arms around me and kissed me. A bit bewildered, I said hello and peered at her questioningly. She was dressed attractively in a skirt and a blouse and a tan tweed sweater. She brought me into the parlor where Mrs. Young greeted me affectionately and stated Mr. Young had not arrived from work yet. We sat there and chatted for a while, and then Jean kissed her mother and said, "We must be off." I uttered a quick goodbye to Mrs. Young and Jean ushered me out the door. As we reached outside, I asked her what the big rush was to leave.
19.
Isn't Biden giving us a address tonight?
Yeah, let's just let it run, see what you find out, what time.
I think it was at 6:30, he already talked.
Well, get a summary.
Huh?
Okay.
Give me a summary and I'll read it. We missed it. He's already sleeping. Let's see what he had to say. Give me the summary
All right, let me see.
and I'll read it.
Biden speech tonight.
It's over with?
Yeah, he did it at 6 o'clock, 6:30. He was too tired to wait longer.
6:30 this morning.
Afternoon. He didn't want to wait till 9.
Oh,
Sleeping.
oh.
Let me see it. I'll read it.
Okay, 8 minutes ago.
I'll read it.
So that's Biden talking, huh?
We're getting the update. Hold on for a second.
I'm trying to. Fine. Oh, it just went over. It just got over. It just ended.
What's that?
Biden. Give me an update.
Well, let me see. I don't know what people are saying. It just ended.
How about Drudge?
Okay.
I'll read the Drudge report.
Huh?
We're trying to get a report right now.
You can put TV on and find out what they said.
Already ended. Did you want to shut this off and watch the TV? Did you want to shut this off and watch the TV? We'll probably...
No, we'll talk.
Well, here's the
No, we'll
synopsis.
talk.
Biden.
I want to read it.
Biden. Okay.
I want to read it. Here's the synopsis. Go into it.
Biden in.
Is this Drudge?
Yeah, that was from Drudge. There.
President Biden drew gasp Thursday evening when he introduced Ukrainian President Zelensky as President Putin, confusing with the Russian tyrant whose forces have invaded Ukraine the past 2.5 years. And now I want to hand it over to the President of Ukraine, who has much courage and determination, Biden said. Okay, you listening to this closely? Biden is introducing the President of Ukraine.
Yeah.
And listen to this. And now I want to hand it over to the President of Ukraine, who has much courage and determination. Biden says, "Ladies and gentlemen, I present you President Putin."
Putin, huh?
Wrong.
Yeah,
President
he said the wrong thing, by the way.
Many in the auditorium appeared to wince as the words left the president's lips. Once the audience members shouted Zelensky, they're saying it's not Putin, it's Zelensky, in an attempt to correct the 81-year-old Biden. Boy, that's screwed up. World leaders on stage appeared unsure whether to clap to weapon Zelensky or wait for Biden to correct himself. No one knew what to do. President Biden drew gasp Thursday evening when he referred to the Ukrainian President Zelensky as President Putin. This is so fucking screwed up. The U.S. President quickly apologized for the embarrassing flub and says it happens because he was so focused on beating the Kremlin strongman. President Putin, we're going to beat President Putin. President Zelensky, I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it, Biden said. Anyway, Mr. President. The Ukrainian leader, 46, shook his head before joking, I'm better. You are a hell of a lot better, Biden responded. The humiliating mix-up occurred while Biden and the leaders of 19 other nations were gathered to announce the signing of the Ukraine Compact. The president had nearly made it through his entire speech announcing the compact without any other major gaffes relying on teleprompters throughout. He even had teleprompters, and he couldn't tell the difference between President Zelensky and President Putin. The mistake is likely to accelerate calls among the congressional Democrats for him to end his bid for second term. Zelensky shrugged off the gaffe, coming to the podium, praised the group, and creating the compact. Instead, the document vaguely committed the signatures to support Ukraine immediate defense and security needs.
Yeah, Zelensky talked a long time.
Yeah. So that's the gist of it. So that's the problem. He took it early so he could get to bed, number one. And number two, he said President Putin instead of President Zelensky.
Well, they knew 8 years ago he had a problem.
Well,
They had him going to speech specialists and everything else.
how many minutes we got here?
14.
Okay. Okay, back to reality of Mr. Jeckovich's book. We reached the parade road and the tennis courts and the bowling greens, which were a short distance from her father's office. The tennis courts and bowling greens were closed for the winter months, but lovely botanical gardens were opening for viewing. It was here that we walked and talked. Her perfume was intoxicating, and her body had a fresh fragrance and alluring that triggered all my bodily manifestations. She asked me about my family. Once again, I was elusive and disdainful, giving only enough information to satisfy her natural curiosity, but did not get into any details. She seemed tense about my family and did not dwell on it, but changed the subject to the dance that night. She remarked that she would like to be back home to change into something more appropriate for the dance. I asked her what I thought of the idea. I said great, with one exception, that we take a cab back to the auditorium. She hesitated a bit, kicking several tiny stones into the garden paths with her petite foot, and then she replied, "All right, I'll compromise." We walked about the garden, since most of the flowers were long gone. Due to the period of the season, we had to be content with the viewing of the trees and the shrubs. After a while, I asked Jean if she'd eaten and if she was hungry. She stated that she would have a cup of tea and biscuit at breakfast and before she had left for work. I told her no wonder she stayed so slender and trim. She never ate and got too much exercise. Riding her bicycle or walking. She suggested that we go to the Hotel Mariners, and they had delicious fish and chips. It was a place she often went to with her father for lunch, as it was only several blocks away from the office. We went back up to Parade Road to Hills Lane and crossed High Street to the intersections of St. Mary's and Towers Hill. The Mariners was not actually a hotel as such, but more of an eatery which could accommodate several dozen guests at its quaint barrel-shaped tables. The entire decor in the place was ship-oriented, with a huge array of model ships suspended from the ceiling and on the shelves placed throughout the room. The reception area was in the shape of a quarterdeck of a large sailing vessel, and situated to one side was a large brass ship bell that would chime on the half and full hour. The place was warm and cozy, with a huge stone fireplace that took almost all the one exterior wall, radiating out of its warmth and goodwill. Jean was right, the fish and chips were great, and I settled for a second helping, which we both shared. We sat and talked over the second cup of tea, and Jean seemed to be in a festive and reflective mood. She would then relate some of her school day experiences on how she was bashful she was in her earlier years. I would chime in whimsically and say, "You're certainly not bashful and shy now." She would playfully slap my hand and then relate another episode from earlier school days, taking my hand and intertwining it with hers. She then related the time she had a terrible crush on a boy a little older than she, and remarked she had never told anyone about it until now. It seemed that she would walk down to the soccer field and watch the match whenever he was playing, and never once informing or even talking to him of how she felt about him. She then went on various other experiences in her school days, relating the smallest detail, and I could see that she was enjoying it immensely as I. She got over that relationship, if you could call it that. It was not until she started working in her father's office that she became serious about a young man, a barrister, who worked there also, but in a separate section. They were seeing one another for a period of a year or so, until he got called up. Unfortunately, she received word through his family that he was shot down over Germany and missing in action. This was over a year ago, and she believed she had gotten over the loss. I sat there and listened to her as she related happenings in her young life. I felt privileged and flattered that she thought enough of me to discuss her innermost feelings with me. I would sympathize with her on something she felt strongly about, and then she would take the opposite viewpoint on a trifle, inconsequential matter. She felt challenged and inspired by my presence and my active participation in our discussion. I felt that she was relating to me some of her most intimate thoughts and aspirations, and that she had never shared with anyone else. Minutes?
Seven.
It was now again. I thought it was tragic and ironic that it should be come to this, considered all the latent talent and intelligence she greatly and modestly displayed. Again, I desired so much to help her in this quest, but to no avail. I just did not know what to do to aid her. I felt extremely distressed and frustrated at my ineptness. She went on to explain somehow she could generate enough interest to cultivate that would ignite the lasting friendship. She thought she had many friends, but they were casual nature. Nothing seemed personal or permanent. Outside of her parents, there was no one she could turn to for advice or even have a stimulating conversation with at times. I got a distinct impression that she desired this very much, but somehow it never came to fruition. Then again,
What are you looking at?
I heard pounding.
Huh?
I heard someone pounding.
Louder?
Pounding. Okay. Next door. It was now and then she talked about her interest and love of music. She understood fully and completely why she would not pursue this further. Due to the economic conditions at home, she would never fault her parents for not affording that opportunity for higher learning, nor do I believe they knew of her desire to continue her musical education. She had resigned herself to continue working with her father and perhaps later in life starting a family right here in Haverfordwest. I thought it was tragic and ironic that it should come to this, considering all the latent talent and intelligence she so greatly and modestly displayed. Again, I desired so much to help her in her quest, but to no avail. I just did not know what to do to aid her, and I felt extremely distressed and frustrated at my ineptness. She went on to explain that she was rather perturbed that she had no close friends. Outside of her parents, there was no one she could turn to for advice or have a stimulating conversation with at times. I got the direct impression that she desired this very much, but somehow it came to fruition. Then she sat and talked at length about the relationship with Bob, a young man missing in action, how they would make a plan for their weekends, and how she looked forward to seeing him. She also stated that her parents approved of him greatly and thought of him as almost as a son. It was the last revelation of Jean's that I became fully aware of what was taking place when I was in her company of her parents during the past week. They were seeing the same relationship with Jean and me that they witnessed with Jean and Bob. They became concerned as our friendship developed, as they did not that we have the repeat performance of what was happening to Bob. They did not want their daughter to go through the same adversity once again, especially in such a short period. I did not blame them one bit, and I shared their concern for their daughter's feelings and welfare. I also felt directly responsible for the predicament they found themselves in, and felt as I am sure they did. The situation would somewhat alleviate and tempered once I was out of their lives, which would be shortly. Jean changed the subject again, and they wanted again and then wanted to leave. First, she had to make ritualistic movements to the powder room. I watched her as she left. I felt a kinship and oneness with this kind one person, and I also felt a deep sense of responsibility towards her for what I had generated between us the past and present several weeks. Once again, I had come to a point of no return, built up a relationship, once again to be terminated, a deep friendship lost forever, never to be ignited again. I felt frustrated and forlorn. Nothing I did seemed to come out right. There were always so many obstacles and roadblocks strewn before me, or emotional deterrents standing in our way. Once again, my salvation and was to move on to whatever lay ahead of me. Jean returned, and we departed to the end, proceeded to walk, all along the busy sidewalk and street. The bustling with bicycles and pedestrians taking their Sunday afternoon stroll. Jean would now then acknowledge someone to say hello and wave as we passed. I even mentioned the observation I had made regarding her greeting to passing acquaintances. She took my arm. Acquaintances, yes. Friends, I hardly think so. I remarked as she was too hard on herself, but she only replied that it was justified in her statement, and that she had many occurrences she could attest to, and I felt I could know her a great deal better in these last few days. And then from what I perceived during our...
And they got that stupid cat in here.
Yeah. Minutes?
40 seconds.
She seemed more open and forthcoming, and she was no longer on guard. Most of all, she trusted me as a friend, a real friend. I was flattered but hesitated to take any credit, for I believe I was no better or worse than most of the people she knew.
Yeah, we'll wrap it.
Pen?
Yeah. Very good. All right, so we'll turn on the news now and watch a little more. Okay.